Hello, I'm Sophia Riso, and my presentation is on the strong partisan divide on civil rights and liberties as shown through different thoughts on Obergefell v. Hodges. I'll give an overview of Obergefell v. Hodges. The majority opinion delivered by Kennedy had a quote that was, "Understandings of marriage and characteristics of a nation where new dimensions of freedom become apparent to new generations. This showcases that the nation is a changing one, and tradition should change with the nation." The majority also argued that the Due Process Clause protects the right to marry for everyone, including same-sex couples, as this is a liberty provided by the Constitution. They also argued that instability and uncertainty would result if the decision was still left to the states whether gay marriage would be recognized. The dissenting opinion delivered by Justices Roberts, Thomas, and Scalia argued that the court does not have the power to enforce same-sex marriage across all the states. It also argued that marriage equality is an implied right and not stated in the Constitution, and that marriage equality does not follow the meaning of liberty in the Constitution. They argued that supporting liberty for marriage equality threatens religious liberty, which has been fought for generations. The article The Triumph of Gay Marriage and the Failure of Constitutional Law provides an overview of the case as well as their opinions. This mentioned the fact that the claim that the Supreme Court ruling in Obergefell v. Hodges marks a break with the tradition of American constitutionalism will not withstand analysis due to similar rulings, Marbury v. Madison, Brown v. Board of Education, and Roe v. Wade, which both also argued for civil liberties over tradition. The article also describes the decision bound citizens by opinions of the Supreme Court, which would isolate those that disagree. And this was showcased in the dissenting opinion as with the ideas of religious liberty being harmed by the same-sex marriage decision. Moving on to the partisan sites. The first site is the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative site. You can see their thoughts through the titles of the articles as shown on the right side of the slide, which include the wreckage from Obergefell and the institution of marriage cannot be erased. The article How Supreme Court's Understanding of Liberty in Gay Marriage Case Could Have Repercussions focuses on their opinions on the case. This describes how there is no legal definition of liberty and how implying that the right to marriage is a liberty is not valid, as this was not stated in the Constitution or any other documents. This article also brought up the fact that Obergefell took back limits on substantive due process, which would be harmful to the nation, while also raising concerns over the Supreme Court as an institution, as they argued that they made this decision based on their ethics as opposed to the law. This article showed obvious support for the dissenting opinion and opposition to the majority opinion. The next site is the Center for American Progress, which is a liberal site. Once again, the titles shown on the right-hand side of the slide show their thoughts on the opinions. Such titles include more than half the states allow discrimination against LGBT Americans. They also use strong language such as the word threat repeatedly to showcase their thoughts on how these groups are being treated. The article A Handful of Elected State Judges Continue to Deny Marriage Equality goes over the opinion of Obergefell and the reactions to it by conservative. This article focuses on the conservative idea that the Supreme Court has no authority and overly broad ideas of religious freedom, and how they refuse to enforce the decision due to this, especially in highly politicized areas. In the article, it is argued that religion does not trump the judge's duty to the Constitution, and that this liberty was in fact valid by the Constitution. Another site, Brookings Institute, is a moderate site. Some titles from this site include Why Tossing Out Same-Sex Marriage Ban Isn't a Slam Dunk, and On Obamacare and Same-Sex Marriage, the GOP Wins Big. The article Obergefell v. Hodges, Same-Sex Marriage and Cultural Jousting in the Supreme Court from this site goes over the Obergefell decision and criticizes both the dissent and majority opinion. First, it focuses on the judges, arguing that the dissenters tended to vote against gay rights, whereas Kennedy tended to rule in favor, which shows that they both have a bias. When criticizing the dissent, it argued that they ignored recent relevant precedent which would have strengthened their argument and instead weakened their argument. It also mentioned Kennedy's failures for the majority opinion, such as the fact that it did not mention sex-based discrimination, which would have strengthened the argument, and also the fact that Kennedy's prose was written more for the nation and not for the law and would have benefited the people as opposed to judges and other in future decisions. The site is the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian site. Titles from this site include Free to Marry, Free to Bake, and But What About the Bakers? The article Libertarianism and the Right to Discriminate argues for the support of legalization of gay marriage, but against anti-discrimination laws on private businesses which could come as a result of this decision. The article argued that private discrimination is a right, and taking this away would violate the First Amendment. They used the idea that private discrimination was allowed and government discrimination is not, to showcase how they agree with the ruling at Obergefell, but also agree that they should not be forced to provide services to gay couples. As you can see from the think tanks mentioned, the partisan divide showcases a stronger divide in opinions based on the Obergefell case. The Heritage Foundation, which was conservative, argued in favor of the dissenting, whereas the Center for American Progress argued why the conservative ideas were wrong. The Brookings Institute pointed out flaws by both ideas, and the Cato Institute spoke in favor of the majority, but only to a certain extent, where no further rulings would harm their liberties. I won't go over all the titles mentioned again, but you can see how they show a strong divide in opinion. Specifically, from the Center for American Progress, the title Masterpiece Cake Shop could turn back the clock 50 years, whereas the Cato Institute argued free to marry, free to bake, which are both opposing ideas to the same case. Overall, the divide in opinions for partisan ideas is very clear from the think tanks.